I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. Living life just like I should. Wouldn't change it if I could. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. Living life just like I should. Wouldn't change it if I could. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. Trying to figure out who I am or who I'm supposed to be. Feel good about where I stand so I can make the most of me. I'm coming back down from space, a million miles away. There's a lot of love in this place, and I'm just trying to say I'm good. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. Living life just like I should. Wouldn't change it if I could. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. Living life just like I should. Wouldn't change it if I could. I'm living this way, worrying about what people say. Feel like I don't fit in, but I won't give up, no I won't give in. Been looking for something more. What you really looking for? It's been with you since we were born, since you were born, and you know you are good. You're good, you're good, you're good. Living life just like I should. Wouldn't change it if I could. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. Living life just like I should. Wouldn't change it if I could. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. You only live once. I'm good with myself. I'm there for my friends until the very end. You only live once. I'm good with myself. I'm there for my friends until the very end. I want to see another love revolution. Find a way to be a better person. If we come together like we should, then we could all be good. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. Living life just like I should. Wouldn't change it if I could. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. Living life just like I should. Wouldn't change it if I could. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good.
Good morning, and it is a good morning. And we are good, and we are expressions of God. And today and every day, we have swung wide the doors to the presence of God, knowing that Spirit is in this place and in all places and all people. And just as this beautiful sun has awakened us to a new day, the Spirit of God within awakens us to divine glory. And this glory within and around us is everywhere we look and in every situation we encounter. With our hearts centered in Spirit, we can quiet our thoughts and meditate on the wonder of all of God's creation and our oneness with it. So I invite you now to take a deep breath, to become comfortable, and to gently release any cares of the day, because your sole purpose at this moment is to experience the divine. And you begin to do so now as you relax in this sacred time and space at Unity Spiritual Center. Seeing through eyes of oneness, acknowledging our oneness, we at Unity Spiritual Center celebrate and honor people of every culture, of every creed, of every religion, of every race, of every age, and every lifestyle, knowing that there are many paths to God, many faces of God, many names for God, but only one God. And that God is expressing through all people in unique, special, and individual ways. As you look at this candle that we light every Sunday, remember that you too have a flame within. You have a divine spark of God, and you are an individualized expression of the divine. We honor the one presence and power of God with Unity's foundation statement, which you'll find on the screen behind me, and I invite you to join me in saying it aloud together. There is only one presence and one power, active as the universe and as my life, God the good, omnipotent. We give thanks for our spiritual community and for the beauty of our spiritual center. We give thanks that Unity Spiritual Center is a welcoming, warm, and inclusive community dedicated to studying and putting into practice empowering principles and tools for happiness, health, prosperity, and successful living. We give thanks that with our spiritual teachings, we can create extraordinary lives and a peaceful planet through our relationship with the loving God presence within each one of us and through our relationships with one another. Our vision and the opportunity for each one of us here is that you discover the power within you to create the life of your dreams, that you have peace of mind and deep happiness, that you enjoy joyous and loving relationships with yourself, with spirit, and with others, that you spend your days doing what you love and feel called to do, and most of all, that you know that your life matters, that you make a difference, and that the world is a better place because you're here. If you're visiting us for the first time, and I know a number of you are, you should have received a gift when you walked through the door. If you did not receive a gift when you walked through the door, please raise your hand and one of our ushers will bring it to you. It's a no more. Okay, we broke the basket, huh? Well, what we love to give out to people who are visiting us for the first time is a shell lei that has a tag on it that says, just as God has a design for every shell in the sea, God also has a design for your life. So if you are visiting us for the first time and you did not receive one, we will be making new ones up this week, and we would love to give you one of those just as a thank you for coming to visit us today. We also give out packets of information. You'll find information about Unity in general and Unity Spiritual Center in particular. And I'm always delighted to have conversations about Unity. So if you have any questions, if you've been here for just one time or for 1,000 times, I'm always happy to discuss Unity with you. And you can find my contact information printed on the back of the newsletter that you should have received when you came in here today. We also have tables in our sanctuary, and we'll be setting one up after the service. We see tables as a symbol of hospitality because we know there's a very special feeling when you're gathered around a table. So we hope that you will stay with us to have food where we can get to know you better, and also to experience a wonderful creative exercise following the service. I'm also going to take this time to introduce our guest speaker. Michael, when he saw me, he said, "Oh, it looks like you're especially happy today because I've got my celebration sparkles on. This is something I only wear on special days, and this is a special day." I'm so happy to be able to introduce you to someone who I've known for almost 20 years, who's a friend, a colleague, and now who is my art teacher. And she's an amazing person. Many of you here, I know, are familiar with her work. She does live life as a great adventure and is a Renaissance woman who communicates her philosophy through paintings, poetry, teachings, and entrepreneurship, and today through our Sunday lesson. For 25 years, she's dedicated her soul work to the study and practice of creativity as a path of healing, which provides access to consciousness. As a curator and gallery owner, she has represented her own work as well as hundreds of women artists. By the age of 40, she achieved incredible success through being in the top 10% of sales for contemporary artists in the US. Her prolific, intuitive painting process led to a desire to teach and provided the foundation for the groundbreaking work on how intentional creativity can give voice to the soul. And you'll have a little taste of that later on today. Her method of creating with mindfulness has reached tens of thousands of students around the world who have gained insight into the hidden self. Her work is taught widely at the university in master's and PhD programs. She has presented at the United Nations and by hundreds of certified teachers and coaches, some of whom are here today and what I am currently studying to be. At the core of her work is the belief that the right to self-express is one of the most basic human rights. Her life path is a spiritual practice and an offering that was awakened with the divine feminine. She's the author of 7 books, as well as a community leader, and she lives and works at the Cosmic Cowgirls Ranch in Sonoma, California, which provides education both in-house and online. So won't you join with me, please, in giving a very warm welcome to Shiloh Sophia. So at this time, as we move into the meditative part of our service and prepare to raise our voices together in song, if you haven't already, I invite you to turn off or mute all cell phones and other electronic devices. And I will turn it over to our music maestro, Michael Hatfield.
We have a tune that we will stay quietly seated. The lyrics will appear on the screen. I'm actually going to play it once through. The melody is fairly familiar, so I think you'll be able to sing along rather quickly if I play it through once, which I am going to do. And it sounds like this. As the deer panteth for the water, so my soul longeth after thee. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee. You're my friend and you are my brother, even though you are a king. I love you more than any other, so much more than anything. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee. I want you more than gold or silver, only you can satisfy. You alone are the real joy giver and the apple of my eye. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee. Thank you.
And now, as we continue to get comfortable in our seats, relaxing even more deeply into this time of worship, prayer, and meditation, let us open our hearts to receive the message of today's daily word. The word for the day is ageless. Is there anyone who would like to read today's daily word? Cheryl Hodgins will read today's daily word. Thank you.
Ageless. We've all heard ageless body, timeless mind. This is the uni version of that. I am a radiant expression of my ageless and eternal self. I am a perfect expression of my true spiritual nature. Every cell in my body is radiant with the light and love inherent in the divine essence. I expend time and energy needlessly when I fret about changes that are inevitable. It's an inevitable part of the aging process. I do not try to prevent or deny the changes, neither do I surrender to the changes as new or negative reality. As author C.S. Lewis wrote, "You are never too old to set another goal or to dream a new dream." I lovingly deny power to any negative thoughts I may hold about the condition or appearance of my physical form. I joyfully affirm I am a radiant expression of my ageless, eternal self. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His sight was unimpaired and his vigor had not abated. And that's from Deuteronomy. Thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl. Unity Spiritual Center is a center of prayer and healing. We have a prayer box at the back of the sanctuary, along with green prayer request forms, and you are always invited to fill one out and place it in the box. Let's just take a moment now to hold those prayer requests in our hearts, the ones that have been written down and the ones that may be unwritten. Let's just hold those in our hearts for a moment. And as we do that, we know that perfect divine love is enfolding each person represented in the prayer chest, and that divine order is taking place for all concerned. The prayer requests that are placed in the box are prayed on by me and by our USC prayer team for 30 days. And then we forward them to Silent Unity at Unity's World Headquarters, where they're prayed on for an additional 30 days. And as I mentioned, there are green prayer request forms in the back by the prayer box, and you're always invited to fill one out. But we do have a part in our service where you can make your prayers audible. So this is the time to offer your prayer needs to your spiritual family here so that we can support you and stand with you. So after we sing the introduction to this song, which is a call and response, you are invited to speak your prayer need aloud, and we will answer each prayer request by singing, "Your prayer is my prayer too."
We are connected by the heart. Where do you end? Where do I start? Whatever you feel, I feel too. You're a part of me. I'm a part of you. Your prayer is my prayer too. 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 Prayer is my prayer too. Your prayer is my prayer too.
We also have a time in our service where you can share something that you feel particularly blessed by. So this is the time to share your thanksgivings, your gratitudes, your blessings with your spiritual family here.
I am grateful that all my piano students showed up on time on Saturday. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful for all that I have. I am so blessed. I am so blessed. I am so grateful. I am so blessed.
We give thanks for this opportunity to bless and to be blessed in spirit. We give thanks for the feelings of connection, of peace and warmth that fill our hearts and minds right now. We give thanks for the privilege of praying for others in our community, in our nation, and around the world. And we affirm that always and in all ways, divine love and divine order is everywhere present. At Unity Spiritual Center, your prayer is our prayer too. Amen.
Mary, did you know that your baby boy will one day walk on water? Mary, did you know that your baby boy would save our sons and daughters? Did you know that your baby boy has come to make you new? This child that you delivered will soon deliver you. Mary, did you know that your baby boy would give sight to the blind man? Mary, did you know that your baby boy would calm the storm with his hand? Did you know that your baby boy has walked where angels trod? And when you kiss your little baby, you've kissed the face of God. Oh, Mary, did you know the blind will see, the deaf will hear, the dead will live again, the lame will leap, the dumb will speak the praises of the Lamb. Mary, did you know that your baby boy is Lord of all creation? Mary, did you know that your baby boy one day would rule the nation? Did you know that your baby boy was heaven's perfect lamb? And the sleeping child you're holding is the great I am.
I remember the day that I walked in and all these women were dancing. And they had these giant hats and these dresses, and they were barefoot, and they were celebrating. And I had never seen any women be like that unless there was a party. But it was a Sunday morning. And I wondered, what's going on in here? And I felt that feeling that we sometimes feel that you would call the Holy Spirit. And I just felt it just rise up inside of me, and tears began to flow. I feel it now just thinking about it. And I have a sore throat, so excuse me as I move through this with you. I'm glad my talk is the alchemy of showing up. And a woman came up to me and she said, the feeling that you have is Jesus. Do you want it? And I was like, yes, I want that. I'm a teenager and I have all these teen boys hanging on my wall and I'm getting into bad stuff that bad girls like to do. And yeah, I actually want whatever that is, whatever that essence is, whatever that feeling is that makes women want to dance. The men were sitting and the men were praying, but the women were dancing, and it was beautiful. But it wouldn't be long after that that the rest of Christianity would settle in. And I instantly went from the dancing, joyful teenager in love with this idea of self-expression and the Spirit flowing through me to a kind of conservatism that all of us, sort of regardless of our traditions, are familiar with. Have you had some experience of that, where you felt the freedom and then you felt constrained? And how did that fit together? Well, my mom was having none of it. We lived in a small town in Anderson Valley called Boonville. And my mom, the very next Sunday, put me in the car, and she drove me to Glide Church here in San Francisco. And as we sat there, I remember her so clearly, and I was saying, I won't have fun. I will not have fun. I don't know what's going on. And as the choir came down the aisle in their tie-dye, and they were dancing, and they were singing, and they were so diverse, and it was so gorgeous. And my mom said, these people love God so much more than you would ever understand at this point. This is what it looks like. And people sat beside me, women who had just gone through sex changes, who sat beside me and threw their arms around me. One side, the transvestite who just had the sex change, the other side, the drunk. And that was my new community. And my mom was like, this is what God looks like. You better get this now, because we're not going to go through this other stuff. So that was the beginning of feeling that feeling of wanting to be with the Spirit, but not wanting that kind that would exclude, that would close the doors, that would not be welcome to people wherever they were on their path. But I had a challenge, and I'm sure many of you have had this challenge yourself as you struggle to find your way and your faith inside of so many different choices and so many different traditions. And I could have left Jesus. I could have stepped out, and I really wanted to, because I didn't want to be in the struggle of what I felt was being laid over me as a young girl child, of what it would look like to be that, especially in a church that was still primarily dominated by men. And yet something called me, that initial feeling, that initial desire, and I decided to stay. And I decided with that staying to study and to take a look at what was that and who was that would calm the storm, that would walk on water, and who would have such a unique relationship with women. And so I dedicated my time then as part of my spiritual practice to studying the relationship of Jesus with the women in the scripture. And I was determined that whoever creator really was, I was going to find evidence of what that presence was and what that healing really was. And I was going to keep it for myself. And if I discovered it, then I would tell others about what that feeling was and what that message is and what that healing truly could be. And one of the opening songs, as we hear the deer that is panting for the water from the Psalms, that feeling of that desire to be with Spirit is what I felt and what many of us feel. Rumi also talks about it when he says that the dog whining for his master is the relationship. And I love this idea of us having the divine within us, but also having this incredible, insatiable thirst to be with and to be one with and to receive blessing and healing and gifts from this one who came with a message that, in my personal and not so humble opinion, is often so missed in many of the traditions. So I'm dusting off the Bible here to get a little bit of this that I discovered that I wanted to share with you. So in Christ's relationship with women, what I found was that every single one was alchemical. That there was a before, a crucible, and an after. Something happened in that. And I felt that there was something there. And when Christ spoke about where two or more are gathered, there I am, I imagined the electromagnetic field of our heart and how it goes out 15 to 20 feet, and how if someone is standing next to you, your field is enveloped, and their field is enveloped, and between you is this sacred third space, and that's perhaps where this healing might happen. If you think of the woman with the issue of blood, in Luke 8:43, it says, "Now a woman having a flow of blood for 12 years, who spent all of her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any. She came from behind. She touched the border of his garment, and immediately the blood stopped. And Jesus said, 'Who touched me?' When all denied it, Peter and those with him said, 'Master, the multitudes throng and press you, and yet you say, "Who touched me?" But Jesus said, 'Somebody touched me, and I perceived the power go out from me.' Now when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, and she declared to him in the presence of all the people the reason she had touched him and how she had been healed immediately. And he said to her, 'Daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you whole. Daughter of Abraham, go in peace. So we think about this moment, this woman's courage, as we're celebrating Women's History Month right now. Think of this in a modern circumstance. If there was a guru or a teacher or a healer who was coming, who was surrounded by their posse, and everybody wants to go be where they are, and this woman who, in the tradition that she was living in, would be a total outcast. Not only was she bleeding, and you weren't supposed to touch bleeding women, but she'd been bleeding a really long time, so it was even more abhorrent for her to be there. So imagine her courage, what she had in her heart and mind and body that day. As she made her way through the crowds, they knew her. They parted the way for her because they didn't want to be touched by her because she was unclean. So a couple of amazing things happen when she enters Jesus' field, right? She touches the hem of the garment. Any of you raised in the old Christian traditions know about the hem of the garment. And what happens is a cosmic exchange of alchemy, where even without his consent, just being in his presence actually completely heals her. But what he says to her is, it's your faith that has made you whole. And he calls her daughter of Abraham. So we have a moment where if we were truly following who Christ was with women, we wouldn't have women who are bleeding now being a taboo, which is still present in most of the major patriarchal spiritual traditions, including in the church where I go. If we were to follow the changes that he made in all of these relationships, we would have a very different church today. And I know that Unity and other traditions strive to find a more expansive view. But part of my stand for staying within the walls instead of leaving is so that I can find the places like this and bring them to light. So I can talk about the woman who anointed him. Do you remember that? Another scene. Here he is at the house of the powerful men, and he's there with all of them, and this woman makes her way through. This is in all of the Gospels, but all in different ways. A woman makes her way through, and she goes to him, and she anoints him with the oil. He says this is for his burial. They're surprised by this. But what else are they surprised by? They're surprised by that she did that he allowed for this moment of absolute intimacy as she is washing his feet with her hair. Just imagine you doing that in a scene of leaders who were not happy for you to be there. And just imagine if you happen to be of questionable reputation and you happened to do that. And they say to him, don't you know who this is? And how about that ointment? That could have been sold to give to the poor. And he says something that is rarely heard in the pulpit. And hopefully some of you know what it is. And after today, you'll remember that he said, this thing that she has done will be spoken of as a memorial to her wherever the gospel is preached. It's the only time he ever says someone else will be remembered. And a woman? Why? Why was it that he wanted us to remember that moment and that woman and that act of devotion? To me, that's that deer panting for the water. That's that dog whining for the master. That's that willing to do anything, to step through the crowd, to be a part of this divine happening, which Yeshua was representing with his very being. And not only that, it says, at that moment, Judas sought how he might betray him. I find it curious when I look at scripture, both mythologically and literally. I love to do both. I love to think, okay, it actually happened. This is what it was going down. Here's what it would mean if it really happened. And then I love to think of it from this story perspective. Well, from a story perspective, it says at that moment that the one who would end up betraying him makes that choice. Okay, so what do you think about that? About at that moment that Jesus uplifts a woman. That's the moment. He'd been thinking about the betrayal already, but he was catalyzed in that moment to betray his master because potentially his own relationship with women, Potentially, this wasn't okay for him to lift up this woman of questionable virtue, moving through the crowd, doing an act of absolute intimacy, making a fool of them. But they think she's making a fool of herself. But Jesus said, when I came, you didn't wash my feet, and you didn't kiss me, and yet she did. And I've taken liberty to blend the stories for the sake of story. So when I think about that Judas part within myself, because he had a role to play in this too, and a difficult one, and a great teaching for us. But if you think of that moment when you would seek to betray because of a belief that you might have, and maybe it's a cultural belief, maybe it's a belief about how gender and sexuality should be. Maybe it's a belief long hidden about some racism that's hidden within you. Maybe it's a belief about another Christian path and how they are radical. There's a moment where many of us have that, where we're willing to betray the thing that we love and that we're serving because we don't like how it's going. But what does Yeshua do but say, we should remember her? But did you hear about her if you heard of the gospel stories? Or did you hear about the woman at the well who actually ended up converting more people to Christ than any of the disciples put together? She has a name. Her name is Fotini. This is another one of those instances where a woman shows up. The woman with the issue of blood shows up. The woman who anoints Christ shows up. They all put themselves in the path of healing and the story that he's telling. The woman at the well, first of all, not even supposed to be talking to her. In fact, when the disciples see it, they cannot believe he is speaking to this woman from a different tribe. So he breaks another taboo. She's from another tribe. But you know what else? He's identifying himself as living water and as the Christ to her in a way he doesn't to anyone else. In the entire scriptures, he says, it's me, to her, to this woman who's been married all these times, has really a terrible reputation in town, and who is an untouchable to his tradition and to the men that he walks with. And then she goes and she tells the story. And I love thinking, again, of that very literal part of the story where she's there and she's telling people about it, and how through that, her life and her reputation, her standing in the society at the time was totally shifted. She is now, the one who's the outcast is now the disciple, is the one who's going to tell the story. She was changed. And the people who were a part of all of that were changed. But we don't hear about her very much either. And we don't think about the relationships that Christ had with women that changed everything. My mom, who's a truly devout Christian, often says that, yeah, maybe they killed him because of her, the collective her, his relationship with women and with the feminine, starting ultimately with his mother, who says yes. She puts herself in the line of healing. Without Mary's yes to this great adventure of bringing birth to the light through her body, through form, we wouldn't even have this story to tell. So we have a woman who's saying yes to something that seems almost impossible. And so I wonder for each of us, is there some way that we haven't been saying yes? Some way that we haven't been showing up for the work that is ours by putting ourselves in the place of healing? Where we haven't been willing to reach out and say, I want to be a part of that. I want to receive that medicine, and I want to be and bring that medicine myself. Because when you receive a healing, and when you heal your reputation and your story and you have new life, what happens then is that you then have the capacity to heal and to tell stories. And I wonder for all of our churches and all of our congregations, where are we with that healing journey? The disciples, following Christ's death and resurrection, believed that he was coming right back in their lifetime. I feel like we're in a state of perpetual waiting on the one hand, and yet we have that continual return that happens within our heart, that he's right here, that consciousness is right here and right now, yet there's still something that we're waiting for. And I think about how healing happens and how there are healings happening around the world, but how they're not consistent and how you can't do it every time and how different traditions pop up and there's all these healings and then they stop. What's going on? What are we missing? And so for that reason, in my personal story, I continue to go back into the scriptures and look at what did he say and do that I am not saying and doing to create an environment, literally at the level of quantum physics, an environment where cellular structure is shifted and healing is now. For many Christian churches, they're in the Lenten season leading up toward the great story of Pascha or Easter. And I'll close with this thought, that I love, again, thinking of that literalness of Christ in the tomb. There's a waking, there's a consciousness, and a body that was no longer living. Something happened physically, right? Did you ever think about that? Like, what had to happen to the cellular structure? How did he get reconstituted? Like, what really happened? Okay, the divine lifted him up, or he lifted him up, whatever happened at the spiritual level. But physically,